A car sped through the snowy night, its tyres skidding on the icy road. Without warning, the passenger window rolled down and a mother dog with her tiny puppies was hurled into the freezing darkness. The vehicle vanished into the storm, leaving behind whimpers barely audible over the howling wind. But just as despair seemed inevitable, something inexplicable happened that would change everything. Tom's foot slammed on the brake as the dark sedan ahead veered wildly and an object was hurled from its passenger window. Not one, but several shapes tumbled onto the icy road, illuminated briefly by his headlights. His chest tightened as the car disappeared into the swirling snow, its taillights vanishing like ghosts in the storm. What had they just thrown out? Heart pounding, he turned on his hazard lights and pulled over, instinct overriding caution. He reached for the flashlight in his glove compartment and stepped out into the biting wind. The snow, now thick and relentless, swirled around him, dampening the sound of his boots crunching on the icy asphalt. The beam of light swept across the road, and his breath caught when it landed on a large, golden-furred dog lying motionless near the shoulder. Its shallow breaths formed faint puffs in the frigid air. Nearby, tiny whimpers pierced the storm. Puppies. Tom swallowed hard, fear and adrenaline surging through him. Edging closer, he spoke in a low, soothing voice. "It's okay, girl. I'm here to help. I won't hurt you." The dog's ears twitched, her eyes cracking open just enough to reveal fear and pain. She didn't growl, didn't move to protect herself or her pups. She was too weak, her injured legs splayed at an unnatural angle. The whimpers grew louder as the flashlight revealed 4 tiny bundles scattered across the icy road. The puppies, no bigger than Tom's gloved hands, shivered violently, their golden fur flecked with snow. "Oh, you poor things," he murmured, his voice thick. He shrugged off his coat, teeth chattering as the icy air cut through his sweater. With careful hands, he began gathering the pups, each one letting out a weak cry before settling into the warmth of his coat. The mother's gaze never left him, her body trembling with cold and pain. "I'll come back for you," he promised, shivering as he tucked the last puppy into the makeshift nest on the passenger floor of his truck. The dog let out a low whine, her eyes darting anxiously between Tom and her pups. Returning to her, he crouched low, speaking gently. "You're a brave girl. Let me help you now." Sliding his arms under her, he lifted with all his strength, the effort straining his back but filling him with resolve. She weighed more than she looked, and her body was limp but heavy with exhaustion. Somehow, he managed to carry her to the truck and ease her onto the passenger seat. The pups whimpered below her, and the mother dog let out a soft, guttural sound, her nose nudging toward them. Tom climbed into the driver's seat, cranking the heat and glancing at his unlikely passengers. The mother's eyes, full of trust and desperation, locked onto his. "We'll get you somewhere safe," he said, his voice trembling. As the storm howled around the truck, he gripped the wheel, determination and fear battling within him. What had happened to these animals? And could he save them in time? Tom tightened his grip on the steering wheel, the truck's wipers battling a losing war against the heavy snow. The storm had worsened, turning the road ahead into a blurred expanse of white. His old Ford pickup groaned as it climbed a gradual incline, its tires occasionally slipping on patches of ice. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the mother dog on the passenger seat. She lay still, her breath shallow, her gaze fixed downward on her puppies nestled in Tom's coat at her feet. "You're doing great, girl," he said softly, his voice breaking the tense silence. "Just hang on a little longer. We'll get you fixed up." Her ears flicked slightly, a faint sign she was listening. Tom wasn't sure if she could understand the words, but his tone seemed to calm her. The truck hit a bump, jolting the cab. A soft whimper came from below, and Tom felt his chest tighten. He thought of the cruelty it took to throw these animals from a moving car. The image of the sedan disappearing into the storm flashed in his mind again, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped the wheel tighter. Who could be so heartless? He pushed the thought aside. Anger wouldn't help them now. Glancing at the dog, he felt a pang of sympathy. She was injured, neglected, yet her focus hadn't wavered from her pups. Her resilience reminded him of Sarah, how she'd faced her illness with the same quiet determination. A lump formed in his throat. He hadn't thought about Sarah this much in years, hadn't let himself. Losing her had left his farmhouse empty, his days repetitive and void of purpose. But now, with this dog and her puppies, he felt an unfamiliar spark, the need to act, to protect. The snow intensified, the wind howling like a living thing. The road ahead was nearly invisible, and Tom slowed to a crawl, his heart hammering. Springfield's emergency veterinary clinic was still miles away, and every passing minute felt like an eternity. "Don't give up on me, Peggy," he murmured, the name slipping out without thought. He glanced at her again, and for a fleeting moment he saw something in her eyes, a faint glimmer of trust. "Yeah, I think Peggy suits you." A puppy wriggled from the coat, poking its tiny head over the edge of the seat. The mother dog made a low sound, half a whine and half a growl, as though urging it back into safety. Tom chuckled despite the tension. "Looks like you've got a feisty one there, Peggy. I'll call him Scout, always the explorer." The truck slid slightly on the icy road, and Tom's breath caught. He adjusted the wheel, his palms sweating despite the cold. "Easy, old girl," he muttered, coaxing the vehicle back into line. The heater hummed at full blast, doing its best to fend off the frigid air seeping through the windows. "We're close. Just a bit further." As the truck crested the final hill, the faint glow of lights appeared in the distance. The veterinary hospital. Relief flooded through Tom, and he reached out to gently pat Peggy's head. "We made it," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. She blinked slowly, her body trembling, but her gaze unwavering. As the snow swirled around him, Tom glanced at the mother dog, her eyes barely open, but still locked on her puppies. He whispered, "Hold on, girl. We're almost there." The truck skidded slightly as Tom pulled into the emergency veterinary clinic's parking lot, the tires crunching over freshly fallen snow. Bright fluorescent lights spilled out onto the icy pavement, a beacon of hope in the otherwise bleak night. Tom jumped out, his boots slipping as he rounded to the passenger side. Peggy lifted her head weakly, her eyes following his every move, while the soft whimpers of the puppies rose from the floor. "It's going to be okay," he murmured, scooping the tiny pups into his coat again. He pressed the truck's door shut with his hip and carried them inside. The warmth of the clinic hit him immediately, and the harsh scent of antiseptic filled the air. A receptionist glanced up, her eyes widening as she saw the state of the animals. "We need help," Tom said, his voice edged with urgency. "The mother's injured, front leg, and the puppies, I don't know. But they were thrown from a moving car." The room came alive with activity. A veterinary technician rushed over with a blanket, gently taking the puppies from Tom's arms. "Bring her in next," the tech instructed, nodding toward the truck. Tom hurried back outside, sliding his arms beneath Peggy's heavy frame. She let out a soft whine, but didn't resist as he carried her through the clinic doors. "She's been through a lot," Tom said, as he laid her carefully onto the waiting gurney. "Do whatever you need to. Just save her." Dr. Maria Ramirez, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, stepped forward. "I'll need some quick details," she said, her gaze already scanning Peggy's injuries. "Can you stay close?" Tom nodded, refusing to leave. As the vet began her assessment, Tom found himself gripping the edge of the counter, his pulse quickening every time Peggy winced or moved. Dr. Ramirez spoke gently. "She's got a fractured radius, likely from being thrown. She'll need surgery to stabilize it. The puppies seem unharmed, scared and cold, but otherwise okay. Are you prepared to cover the costs, or should we contact a rescue?" "I'll pay," Tom said firmly, his voice surprising even himself. "Just take care of her." The vet smiled slightly. "She'll need a name for our records." Tom glanced at the dog, whose golden fur was now dull and matted, but whose spirit had somehow endured. "Peggy," he said softly, Her name is Peggy. The team moved swiftly, preparing Peggy for surgery, while another tech guided Tom to a small room with the puppies. "They'll need bottle feeding every few hours," the tech explained, handing him a formula bottle and demonstrating. As he cradled the smallest pup in his hands, Tom felt an odd sense of responsibility settling over him. When Dr. Ramirez returned, her face was calm but serious. "We're ready to take her in now. The procedure should go smoothly, but there's always some risk. We'll let you know as soon as she's out." Tom watched as Peggy was wheeled into the operating room, her golden fur stark against the sterile white sheets. Would she come back to them? Tom sat cross-legged on the clinic floor, the smallest puppy curled in his lap while the others nestled together in the soft blanket provided by the staff. The room was quiet, except for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock and the occasional faint whimper from the pups. He adjusted the bottle in his hand, encouraging the tiny pup to latch on. "Easy there, little one," he murmured. "We'll get you fed, and everything will be okay." The smallest puppy, with a perfectly round brown circle around her left eye, suckled weakly, her tiny paws kneading at the bottle. "You're Daisy," Tom whispered. "Gentle and sweet, just like the flower." He chuckled softly at himself. Naming puppies wasn't on his to-do list when he set out for his prescription earlier that night. The largest of the litter, a male with a bold white patch on his chest, clambered over his siblings and let out a demanding yip. "Well, aren't you the brave one?" Tom said, smiling. "Scout, it suits you." The other two pups were quieter. A pale golden male lay stretched out, nearly invisible against the blanket except for his deep black nose. "Ghost," Tom said thoughtfully. "Silent, but there." The final pup, a female with watchful, curious eyes, seemed to observe everything with calm intelligence. "And you're sage," he decided, "smart and steady." Feeding them took time, and as each pup settled into a full-bellied sleep, Tom found himself marveling at their resilience. Just hours ago, these fragile creatures had been thrown into the cold, and yet here they were, fighting to survive. He felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness, a fierce determination to see them through this. As the night wore on, Tom pulled out his phone and dialed Martha Wilson, his neighbor. Her familiar, no-nonsense voice answered on the second ring. "Tom, it's late. What's wrong?" Tom hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I found a dog and her puppies tonight. They were thrown from a car. The mom's in surgery right now, and I'm here with the pups. Can you check on the house and pick up my prescription in the morning?" Martha was silent for a moment before she spoke again, her voice softer. "Of course, Tom. Do you need anything else?" He glanced at the pups, now piled in a warm heap, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But thanks, Martha." "You're doing a good thing," she said firmly. "Those poor animals. Let me know if you need anything." Tom ended the call and leaned back against the wall, exhaustion tugging at him. Yet beneath the fatigue was something unfamiliar, a sense of purpose. These animals needed him, and for the first time in years, he felt like he mattered again. He thought of Sarah, of how she'd wanted a family, how they'd dreamed of filling the farmhouse with the sound of children's laughter. The emptiness of those lost dreams had weighed on him for so long, but now, surrounded by the soft snores of puppies, that weight began to lift. Maybe this wasn't the family he'd envisioned, but it was a family nonetheless. Daisy stirred in his hands, her tiny mouth opening in a sleepy yawn. Tom cradled her closer, stroking her soft fur as she nuzzled into his warmth. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, as much to himself as to her. "All of you are." For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. The morning sunlight filtered through the frosted clinic windows as Tom sat by Peggy's recovery cage. Her eyes were open now, alert and warm as they followed every movement he made. The bandage on her front leg was neatly secured, a stark reminder of the cruelty she had endured. But her tail gave a faint thump when Tom leaned closer, offering his hand for her to sniff. You're a fighter, Peggy, he said softly. We're getting out of here soon, all of us. Dr. Ramirez entered the room, a smile brightening her tired face. She's doing remarkably well, she said, crouching down to check Peggy's vitals. The surgery went smoothly, and she's already responding to pain management, but she'll need rest and physical therapy for a full recovery. Think you can handle that? Tom nodded without hesitation. She's coming home with me. So are the puppies. The vet looked at him thoughtfully. It's a big commitment. 4 growing puppies and an injured mother. You're sure? I'm sure, Tom said firmly. They've been through enough. They're not going anywhere else. Later that afternoon, Peggy was carefully loaded into the truck, her puppies nestled in their makeshift bed on the passenger floor. Tom had to drive slowly, every bump in the road threatening to jostle Peggy's fragile leg. She didn't seem to mind, though. Her head rested on the edge of the seat, her eyes focused on her puppies, who occasionally let out tiny yips or curious squeaks. When they arrived at the farmhouse, Tom hesitated for a moment before opening the door. The house had always felt too large and empty since Sarah's passing, a hollow shell of the life they had planned. But today, it felt different. He carried Peggy inside first, setting her gently on a thick bed of blankets in the mudroom. She whined softly, her tail wagging weakly as her puppies were brought in one by one, eagerly clambering over her in excitement. Home, Tom said aloud, the word feeling strange but comforting. This is home now. Over the next few days, the farmhouse transformed. Tom converted the mudroom into a cozy recovery space, complete with a puppy pen and soft bedding. Supplies began to arrive. Dog food, toys, and even a handmade gate from Martha's husband, Bill. The community had rallied around him, moved by the story of Peggy and her pups. One evening, Martha stopped by with a thermos of soup and a knowing smile. You've got quite the operation here, she said, watching as Tom bottle-fed Daisy while Scout attempted to climb out of the pen. What's next? A full-on rescue? Tom chuckled, but the idea stuck with him long after Martha left. The barn on his property had stood unused for years, its spacious interior perfect for housing more animals. Could he do it? Could he turn his home into a place where animals like Peggy and her pups could find safety? Peggy's progress was steady. Her limp remained, but her spirit was unbroken. She watched over her puppies with the same quiet strength she had shown since that first night, her eyes often meeting Tom's with an almost human understanding. One morning, as Tom opened the back door to let in the crisp spring air, Peggy rose on her bandaged leg and hobbled toward him. He reached down, scratching behind her ears as she stepped outside. The puppies tumbled after her, their tiny feet skittering on the hardwood floors. As Peggy limped into the farmhouse for the first time, her tail wagged softly as if sensing she was finally home. The warm buzz of activity filled the barn as volunteers hammered, painted, and assembled enclosures. The old structure, once silent and empty, was coming alive. Tom stood near the entrance, watching as the vision in his mind slowly turned into reality. What had once been a neglected storage space was now on its way to becoming a haven for animals in need, a rescue facility he had decided to call Second Chances. Peggy wandered beside him, her slight limp barely noticeable as she sniffed at a stack of freshly cut lumber. Her puppies, now gangly adolescents, bounded across the yard, their boundless energy contagious. Scout led the charge, barking excitedly as Ghost and Daisy chased him, while Sage watched with calm detachment, always the thoughtful observer. Hard to believe this is the same place, Martha said, walking up beside Tom with a basket of sandwiches for the volunteers. She glanced at the nearly finished enclosures and the growing stack of donated supplies. You've built something incredible here. Tom smiled, his eyes following Peggy as she trotted over to the puppies, gently nudging them away from the construction area. I didn't do it alone. Peggy's been the real inspiration. Watching her heal, seeing how she welcomed every new dog we've brought in, it's like she knows they need her. Martha chuckled, handing him a sandwich. She's got a gift, that one. And you, well, Sarah would be proud. Tom's throat tightened at the mention of his late wife. He looked down at the sandwich in his hands, his voice low when he finally spoke. Sarah always wanted this place to be full of life. We thought it would be kids, but maybe this is what she meant. It feels like she's here somehow. Martha placed a hand on his shoulder. She'd be thrilled, Tom. You're giving these animals a second chance, and in a way, you've given yourself one too. Over the weeks, the rescue began to take shape. Local families arrived to adopt some of the dogs Tom had taken in, including Peggy's pups. Scout went to a family with 3 adventurous boys, while Daisy joined an older couple who doted on her gentle nature. Ghost and Sage remained at the rescue, their unique temperaments making them invaluable in helping new arrivals settle in. Tom's days became a whirlwind of feeding schedules, training sessions, and vet appointments. Yet, for all the hard work, he felt more alive than he had in years. Every animal that arrived brought its own story of hardship, and each one reminded him of Peggy and that snowy night on Route 27. The ripple effect of kindness became clear one afternoon when a van pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Angela Torres, the manager of a nearby shelter that was overcrowded and struggling. With her was a timid black Labrador mix and 6 tiny puppies. Tom's heart clenched at the sight of them, their condition a painful reminder of Peggy and her litter. "Think you can take them in?" Angela asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "They need a safe place." Peggy seemed to sense the newcomer's fear. She approached slowly, her tail wagging in gentle arcs. The mother dog tensed at first, but relaxed as Peggy sat beside her, offering silent reassurance. Tom watched the interaction with quiet awe. "We'll make room," he said firmly. "There's always room." By summer, Second Chances had become a community effort. Former students, neighbours, and even strangers brought donations, volunteered their time, and spread the word. Local news stations covered the rescue story, shining a light on the work being done and the lives being saved. The attention even helped law enforcement track down the driver of the sedan that had abandoned Peggy and her pups, bringing a sense of justice to their story. One evening, Tom leaned against the barn doorway, watching the latest group of rescues settle in. Peggy was at the centre of it all, guiding the Labrador mix to her freshly prepared bed. Her movements were careful but assured, her limping steps filled with quiet strength. Tom's eyes softened as he took in the scene, the barn now glowing with warmth and life. In Peggy's gentle guidance, he saw the heart of everything he had built. The second chances, not just for the animals, but for himself and the community that had rallied behind him. For the first time in years, the farmhouse and its barn felt like a true home. Tom's gaze lingered on Peggy, her golden fur catching the soft glow of the barn lights as she curled up beside the new mother dog. The sound of playful barks and wagging tails filled the air, a symphony of hope that had once been missing from his life. He knelt down, gently stroking Peggy's head. "You've saved more lives than you'll ever know," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Peggy looked up at him with those wise, trusting eyes, and in that moment, it was clear. They had saved each other. What would you do if you were in Tom's shoes? Let us know in the comments, and if Peggy's journey inspired you, give this video a like and subscribe for more stories of hope and second chances.